My name's Derek Ashmore. I work with a team of Devops ninjas. They have to support a number of AWS Lambdas. And this presentation is basically in bullet point form, best or practices that we adopted to make our lives easier. Essentially what we did is basically adopted practices which were easy to implement and were low-hanging fruit, basically, looking for high strategic value and ease of implementation. First bullet point, by default, for errors, you don't get enough information to really diagnose most problems effectively. We've taken the practice of incorporating what was fed to the Lambda in the error message, and we found that significantly reduced support development time for errors that we encountered. Next thing is clear error messages. Check your arguments up front. Third thing is basically in a world where a lot of Lambdas are deployed manually, it's not always obvious where the source control for a particular Lambda is. So we put that at the front. Next thing we do is we separate Lambda logic from business logic, and that makes the business logic where your complexity is a lot easier to locally develop and debug. None of these bullet points are really rocket science, and they're all easy to implement, and most developers don't do it, but they can save support time immensely. Next thing, I see a lot of organizations manually deploying their Lambdas, automate them. They're easy enough. Automation's easy enough with Terraform, et cetera, these days. There's no reason to do anything else. Another practice I see is a Lambda written and then implemented in dozens of accounts throughout the enterprise. We adopted the practice of centrally installing Lambdas and then making them, enabling them to do work in remote accounts. The benefit is you only have one copy deployed, and when changes are made, you only have to basically update one copy. And the way you do this is through STS. You basically assume a remote account role. From that, you get a session in that remote account, and you can do your work. Basically, there's an example on my GitHub. For workloads over 15 minutes, it used to be 5. You obviously have to split that workload into other Lambdas, and you can do that fairly easily. Keep in mind there are some constraints there. The other thing we ran into is if you go crazy with Lambdas, invoking Lambdas, support's a nightmare. So we limited invocations to one level. You can use step functions these days if you need more, but we try to avoid nesting more than one level if we can, just to make our lives easier. Now let's talk dependencies and secrets. Essentially, I was at a client site once where the deployment for a Lambda, the instructions were cut and paste this code and then change the hard-coded Splunk channels that you were forwarding Splunk logs to. You have the ability to inject parameters. We started using them robustly. And one of my pet peeves is seeing database credentials or other secrets in Git repos or in Lambda configurations. Basically, use a digital vault, and I recommend Secrets Manager for the sole reason that you don't need a secret to get a secret. If you use one of the other vendor vaults, you need credentials to get into the vault itself, which just kicks the can down the road. Every developer I've seen basically ports what they do in a non-Lambda environment into a Lambda environment. For example, Java developers always do Spring. Use Juice instead. If you have questions over any of these or disagreements, tag me afterwards. This slide deck is posted on LinkedIn as well as my slide share. Thank you for listening to me.